Ever wonder how you check every box and still feel empty inside? Welcome to Rewiring Health, the space for the woman who holds it all together on the outside while quietly losing pieces of herself on the inside. The woman who fawns to keep the peace, overachieves to feel worthy, and sacrifices her needs to avoid disappointing anyone. Here, you will learn a new way. Each episode will help you understand your nervous system, break the patterns that drain you, and rebuild a life rooted in self-respect, calm confidence, and genuine inner peace. I'm Kelly Kessler, and this is your homecoming. Let's dive in. Have you ever noticed your skin reflects your stress? I used to struggle with mine, dry, dull, reactive, until I started pairing nervous system regulation with products that actually honor your body. That's why I love Milk and Butterflies. They handcraft every formula with 100% organic ingredients and powerful aromatherapy oils. They aren't just products for your skin, they're rituals that restore hydration, resilience, and calm even in the busiest seasons of our life. You can try them for yourself and feel the difference. Head to Milk and Butterflies and use my promo code Dr. Kelly for free shipping. That's DRKELLY for free shipping. Also, check out the link in the description for the podcast. Have you ever realized the patterns you're untangling weren't yours to begin with? Yet you're the one brave enough to break them. If that's you, this episode is a powerful reminder of just how strong, intuitive, and self-aware you really are. Today I'm joined by Alyssa Scarano, founder of the Collective Therapy and Wellness. Together we explore what it means to reclaim your emotional safety, stop over-explaining, and trust your own inner wisdom, even when old survival patterns try to pull you back. We talk about the longing to feel seen, the courage it takes to validate yourself first, and how to distinguish fear from intuition so that you can act from clarity instead of conditioning. In this episode, we dive into unpacking generational wounds, reparenting yourself, and the quiet power of listening to your body as a guide. This conversation is your invitation to step into your own authority, honor your truth, and recognize just how much healing you've already done. Take a breath. You're not just breaking cycles, you're building a new legacy. Now let's dive in. All right, welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. So honored to have Alyssa Scarano on the podcast today. So thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Kelly. I'm really excited to dive in today.
Same, yes. We're just chatting. This is a topic that I think is really going to hit home for so many people. And what we're talking about is generational cycle breaking and what all encompasses that. So we're going to dive into that. But before we get into that, I would love to just hear some of your backstory. What led you to helping the people that you do, and what does your journey look like?
Yeah, we were just diving into this a little bit. So I first got into therapy. I mean, it goes even just further back, like, right out of high school, you're like being tasked with, okay, who are you? Who do you want to be? Make that huge decision now, and you don't have really a lot of time to figure it out, and you're still like really finding your feet. And so I went to art school. And I was actually in fashion design, so a completely different field. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, I love clothes. Everybody always told me I should do something with art. And this mixes the two. So let's do it. And I got there and I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like it feels empty. Like I felt like right then and there, I knew I wanted to do something that felt a little bit more impactful, like I was making a difference. And so I dropped out against everybody's will, came home, and I was like, all right, well, we're starting from scratch. And what do I like? And so I went into English, and I always liked stories, people's stories, and the idea of the narrator's view on things and the words that people use to describe their experiences. And, that developed into just other interests. I had like 3 majors by the time I graduated because I really just kind of explored and got curious. And, through my own personal growth journey through therapy, I was able to develop like my own words to tell my story and to use my voice and speak up. That was something that I never truly felt comfortable with. So even being here is part of my continued self-growth, because I am not necessarily somebody that feels comfortable just speaking, and I've been doing this for a little bit, and
Yeah.
that fear is not there as much. If anything, I feel more empowered. So I just wanted to say that because that's huge.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, so you offering this for me is such a big deal.
Aw.
Um, and then let's see. So, my first job outside of grad school, I always said that I would never work with families. It's too much. There's a lot going on in the room. There's a lot of conflict. Like, I know things with my family, like I don't want to be a family therapist. So straight out of grad school, what job did I get? Working with families. And it was the best experience that I could have ever had. I learned so much about being a clinician and about family dynamics and roles and patterns of behavior and the effects of like early socialization on our identity development and the way that we see ourselves and see other people. And it really shaped my experience in so many ways. So if there's therapists or early therapists listening to this, it's like, don't take yourself out of an opportunity just because of a fear, because it really, I think, is what opened my eyes into becoming the therapist that I am today. I became very interested in relationship dynamics and how that affects us individually, whether we're in a relationship or in a social setting or having an interpersonal conversation. And that over time morphed into really niching and specializing in not just relationships, but in healing from relational trauma and from childhood trauma in general, or the effects of that on our functioning today. And those traumas don't have to be like I came from a really abusive background or a neglectful background. Trauma can be all these little traumas, these little T traumas that wire our brain or our understanding of ourselves or the people around us. Early socialization about learning who I am and who I need to be in these dynamics does then get carried over and then passed on through generations, right, on our kids and then their kids. And so how do we catch those things that aren't helpful, right? Or keeping us stuck? Or how do we break the chain between, this story that I was told about who I need to be or that I felt like I needed to be in order to survive? How do I break that chain and really feel comfortable being who I am and who is that version of myself? And one of the most rewarding, I think, pieces of it is that when you work in this relational lens, looking at or viewing or developing a relationship with a client using that lens, the way I see it is I am providing an experience of what a safe, excuse me, safe and healthy relationship feels like, which for a lot of the time, that's an experience that not many people have had, right? Which is why there's sometimes we have the resistance or the avoidance that comes up around having all of our emotions and speaking our mind. And so being able to create, this space or this vacuum where we can have that in an intimate way and that safety is the healing process in and of itself. A lot of people will come to me and be like, okay, I'm struggling with this. What do I do? And I'm like, well, let's sit with it and look at it and talk about it. And that is the work, right? Like I can give you the scope, the coping skills and the strategies and the reframes. And yes, we're going to do that. Absolutely. But the experience is the healing. And so being able to provide people with that, it's something that I feel like is really profound and sacred. And I love it. And the way I see it is I not only am I doing that with my clients, I'm doing that with everyone that I work with, whether hopefully here with you, right? Anyone I speak to, but also my team. I try to be that space for them to help them be bigger and bolder and more comfortable with themselves as clinicians and as people. So it's really, yeah, it's really exciting work. I hope that answered your question. I kind of
Oh,
went off a
100%.
little bit.
There's so much I want to unpack from that because so much I can relate to that with what you just said too. And that safe space like really hits home because I think sometimes we think, especially if we haven't experienced like the big T traumas, like if we've just experienced like some of the small T traumas, we don't really look at them as being impactful, but we can think that we've always had a safe space and we don't realize how much of a mask we put on to be in that survival mode when we are not aware that maybe some of the spaces we were in growing up were not actually emotionally safe for us. So
Right.
it can be so eye-opening when you start to see like, oh, wow, I'm not being judged for what I'm saying. Like, oh my gosh, I can like open up and say what I'm actually feeling, or even just get in touch with my feelings again because maybe I've suppressed them for years. And can you talk about like some things that maybe we don't realize we grew up in that were not necessarily safe spaces emotionally, that we might see like, well, I had a house, I had a roof over my head, I had food, I had parents that maybe were there, and like you look at your life, you're like, I had a good childhood, but yet there's something that's missing. Can you talk about some of those subtleties of
Yeah.
not the safe spaces?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Is like it's not necessarily that like any of us are immune to any of these like learnings, really, right? And I'm not saying that to necessarily like blanket things or scare anybody of like you've had trauma. Like no, 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 no. It's more like we have these early socialization experiences, right? Like you think about how language is developed, right? It's developed from hearing, listening, modeling. If our parents used certain words with as they talked about themselves and we heard it, or as they talked to our, their significant other people in their life, we heard that. And that becomes our own early language and early learnings that then we start to use, right? And so those things like that, it's just a matter of how the brain, learns and makes those associations from even like, sure, it can be a sense of like what's safe and not safe, right?
Mhm.
And also what's good and what's good and what's bad. Um, and so I think when we ultimately boil it down, how this all kind of can be very subtle is the fact that at the core of each and every one of us is a desire and a need to feel like we belong and to feel like we matter and to feel accepted. That is at the core. Sure, we need food, we need warmth, we need safety, physical safety, but that is at the core. We were meant to be, connected in that way. And so we develop ideas of how we need to act
Mhm.
and how we should present ourselves, right? Very early on in order to have that connection and the other needs met from there. And so those early learnings, yes, some of them can cause barriers when we're an adult, right? If you needed to be the good girl, right? Then maybe growing up, like there wasn't a lot of space to say what was really on your mind. And I hope
Mhm.
it's okay to curse because I do curse.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
but like, don't be a bitch. When in
Mhm.
reality, it's like, maybe I'm not being a bitch. Maybe I'm just really setting a boundary and being assertive,
Mhm.
right? But that wasn't something that I had experiences of like, I could do that.
Mhm.
Another one is like sometimes love is learned as being like conditional under performance, right? Like my parents really gave me a lot of attention and love and admiration and showed that they were proud of me when I did well in school. So I learned that I needed to do that, right? When in reality, like maybe our parents weren't trying to help, give us that association. Truth
Mhm.
is, parenting is hard and there's 1,000 things to do and life is on fire and bills need to get paid. So perhaps like those little dull lulls, right, are the moments that things go unnoticed, right? And yet, oh, you got an award. Huge, huge deal, right? So those become like early learnings about who we need to be, and they are very subtle. And it's not until like, maybe we're at work or we're married and having families of our own that then that starts to come up, that that mechanism or that association is no longer really working because my performance is not where I learned that it should be for the first time, for whatever reason, not at a fault of your own, but because things look a little bit different now.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like how those little subtleties can have early seeds and then later on come out. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh, there's so much of what you said. I'm like, I so resonate with. And it's amazing how you don't even realize that's happening or the belief systems that you have because they're so under the surface. But then like from my experience in hindsight, I could see it when I started to see things more clearly. But I mean, I lived most of my life doing the same patterns and in all different situations. And I think so many of us unconsciously do the same things, say the same things, expect the same things. We don't even realize we're stuck in a pattern because it's all we know. And
And it works, right? It
exactly, we've
works.
survived.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Like in order to get that love, you
Mhm.
did those things. In order
Yeah.
to, get recognition, you were the good girl, you were the good boy. Like,
Mhm.
and it worked
Yeah.
continuously for all these years. But at some point, like it might maybe not be working or
Yeah.
leading to other things where you're not truly in a lot, like acting or behaving or making choices that feel aligned with what it is you truly want and need.
Yeah.
We can lose ourselves in the ideas of who we feel like we need to be because of
Yeah.
who we've had to be.
Right. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean we're wired for survival, not for happiness. And so
Ah,
we can feel empty inside but still be thriving on the outside. It's like putting that smile on and feeling like you're soul crushing inside. It's something that I think so many of us experience, especially women. Just because this is mostly a women-driven audience that listens to this, but it's like you put on a happy face for your kids, for your spouse, for work, and then you get back home and in behind closed doors, like the anguish and the pain and the draining sensation that you have. And it's like, I think this is where you start to see like, oh my gosh, I can't live like this anymore. And I think for so many women, like myself included, I had to get to a place of so much pain to be able to see things more for what they were and make those changes. Do you have to get to a place of that pain, or is this something that you can be more proactive about and recognize, like, oh, these are the patterns, like, how do I navigate this differently?
yeah. I honestly, I think do you have to wait for the bus to come and hit you? No, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, I think it's being a little bit more easeful with ourselves. That's truthfully, sometimes it's not until we feel some sort of pain that we realize there's something going on. And that happens with our physical health too, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that is the case. Life has a way of kind of peeling back the layers sometimes, or one of my little isms that I often use with my clients, and a lot of people say that they like it, is you can't hold a match in your hand and it just lights on fire. It has to strike up against something, right? So if there's a big reaction or an internal experience of confusion or conflict, and maybe that, comes up against something that, um, like in a way where you didn't want to have a certain reaction, it was bigger than the event, or I can't get past it, like that's because there's something sticky there that struck up against that match, right? So that's an indication of like, okay, maybe I should kind of get a little bit curious around this, and maybe it'd be good to talk to somebody who's not so intimately connected to it, where their emotions are clouding what's happening, and they can kind of just hear what I'm saying and what my experience is. And that's where that safety is truly important. The intimacy that you build with your therapist is important. So I think that's the first key, is knowing that sometimes it really isn't that we know these things until it does hit us.
Mhm.
In terms of like, do we have to wait for that? No, absolutely not. Like, that's like saying, do I have to wait until I'm depressed to go to therapy? No, therapy is really about like self-development and self-growth. And ultimately, if you're just curious about yourself, like, go for it, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
in those discussions, I think, okay, how do we do that, Alyssa? Like, I'm making the call, I'm reaching out to somebody, it all works out. They've got availability. I can meet it that day. Now what? Like, is that therapist going to know what I want to kind of look at and what, because I'm not sure, right? Life hasn't kind of hit me in the face with
Yeah.
something, or I don't feel like a match went up, right?
Mhm.
So in that scenario, it would be a matter of like advocating for what you want and saying like, this is what I want to look into. I want to look into, why these are my beliefs. Why
Mhm.
am I so like gung ho about this thing, or what are the things that have helped me grow into the person that I am, and perhaps are there areas for growth, because maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure if this is something that really truly aligns with me. I think we all really can have that gut feeling of this isn't quite right,
Mhm.
and ultimately, and I say quite right, not that's a terrible word, but something, it doesn't fully mesh, I guess, with us.
Mhm.
That's the better way
Yeah.
of saying it. So the curiosity is the first piece, really.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think, just approaching it with curiosity versus like, what's wrong with me? That can be also being
yes.
like a question so many of us ask, especially if you internalize the things that you've experienced. Like, there must be something wrong with me, and maybe not realizing that it was a lot of environmental factors that played into it, or just these patterns that you didn't see or couldn't realize were happening behind the scenes. So,
Exactly.
yeah, powerful. One thing I want to ask is, as you start to be more self-reflective and gain that self-awareness of like what the patterns are, and you start to see like, oh, I see this exact thing, and maybe like your parent or your caregiver, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm just repeating that. There's a lot of fear of like, okay, if I change, like, what does the dynamic look like now with maybe parents or caregivers? Can you talk about that, and how do you navigate, like, if you're on a self-growth journey and maybe the people around you are not, what does that look like when you are navigating it?
Yeah. So your people in your life are used to you for all the years that you've been alive operating in one way, right? And the interesting part of how relationship dynamics work is like we are always dancing with each other. So you move, I move, you move, I move, right? And the way we move together is all based on our own early learnings,
Mhm.
traumas, little traumas, and experiences that we've gone through. How do I maintain safety here in this moment with you, right? And so ultimately, the way that you might have been operating with these relationships that have gone on for years are based on the other person's need for safety as well. So if you've made yourself smaller or needed to be smaller in those relationships, just as an example, because this comes up in a bunch of different ways, then it might start to get uncomfortable for the
Mhm.
other person because you're no longer being fitting that role, and that role helped them be safe.
Mhm.
So typically the answer is like people might not like it, but that's
Mhm.
why. Because now if you're being more expressive, right? Or sharing your emotions, for example, right? When someone's having an emotion, it automatically will initiate an emotion in you, kind of like if you're listening to a song or watching a movie and there's a certain scene that just, or even the way someone is singing the song and the background music, if it's going to resonate on some level with something internally, right? That sticky spot maybe. In the same way, our interactions with people do the same thing. That's why we walk away from conversations sometimes feeling anxious when I wasn't anxious going in, or um, judging ourselves all of a sudden when you weren't judging yourself before, or even just happier. Like, wow, I hung up with that person and that just like made my day, you know? We're always picking up on each other's stuff. It's just a matter of whether or not we're paying attention. So
Mhm.
ultimately, when we take that little nugget and we apply it here, if you're all of a sudden changing that dynamic because you're responding differently, it's going to cause somebody else to kind of then have to kind of face their own emotions that they might not have faced in their own lives for however many years
Mhm.
that has been happening in their life. So considering that, it can help us have sometimes a little bit more compassion rather than frustration, that now that I'm being different and I'm still not getting what I want out of this interaction. Okay, but that's why. That's based on their own needs and their own survival. But yeah, sometimes people aren't gonna be so happy, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
know, we deserve to have all of our feelings, right? If someone says to you, and we've all been there, like,
Mhm.
don't think that way, don't feel that way. Like, if only it were that easy, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
if someone doesn't like something, they're entitled to their feelings, and just so are you, and that's okay. It's just a feeling.
Yeah. Hmm. And then like diving deeper into that, because then it talk about like maybe like family systems, like if you have a whole family unit and they're all operating on maybe some of those belief systems that have always been around, and now you're starting to operate on a different belief system of maybe like self-love, self-respect, speaking up for yourself, and now you don't even fit the family system. Can you talk about navigating that journey where you may feel very alone in the process, but yet also feeling empowered, and that
Mhm.
duality of what's going on between that?
Right. So ultimately to sit here and say like, oh, it's going to be great. Like, I'm going to be real. Like, it could feel more disorienting in those moments or bring up self-doubt and yes, loneliness, because now that dynamic is different and you're the piece that's different, right? Or starting to move differently. So in that sense, yeah, it then things start to shift because if you're taking that energy or that different approach or, showing up in just a more aligned way,
Mhm.
dynamics might fall apart a little bit, but then there's opportunities to create new dynamics, maybe with new people, right? Outside of the family dynamic, outside of the relationships that you've had. And it doesn't mean that we're saying goodbye to the other ones. We're just not relying on those relationships anymore
Mhm.
for the need or wish fulfillment from childhood, from, throughout adolescence and then adulthood. So
Mhm.
yeah, it could be more disorienting at first, but I think it's part of finding your feet, not the feet that you were told, the shoes that you were told you had to wear.
Right. I love that. Yes, 100%. And like, I think it's just to maybe getting through that messy middle and to see it more clearly on the other side can be really powerful. It's just kind of getting through that and realizing, oh, like that's part of the journey. But, I appreciate you sharing that because sometimes people can make transformation look like sunshine and butterflies. You don't realize that there's a lot that goes into it. It's a roller coaster. And just when you expect that, I think you can understand like, oh, that's just part of the process. There's not something wrong with me or this, I'm not making the wrong decision right now because it's hard.
Right.
So
And it's a boundary thing, right? I think
yeah.
it goes back to like, other people's reactions,
Hmm.
behaviors, choices. Sure, do we like stir the pot for people's emotions? Absolutely. But their reactions, their behaviors, their choices, that's based on their stuff, their survival, their, right? So as much as maybe that dynamic starts to feel a little isolating, I don't have to own that, internalize it, define myself against it. It doesn't have to make up the whole story of, well, what's to come. I can
Hmm.
write a new one, or I can just
Yeah.
turn the page, might
Mhm.
start a new chapter.
Yeah, it's so powerful because I think so many of us, especially like if you're a people pleaser, you feel like you are responsible for other people's emotions. Like you've bared the burden of it for maybe years, and now to make that transition of like, oh, if they're upset, it's not something I have to hold on to or try to process. Like that's their stuff. So it's very freeing to be like, oh my gosh, all I have to do is worry about my stuff. That's really empowering. One thing I think that can become a trap, and I've seen this in my own life, is like the need to feel like you have to have other people understand your decisions. Like you over explain yourself of like, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it, X, Y, and Z. And then they still don't understand. You find yourself just in this trap of like trying to get them to see what is happening and why you're doing what you're doing. Can you talk about that? How do you navigate that? And what's your perspective on that of people you've worked with?
Yeah, yes, yes. So when we boil it down, and this is where curiosity comes in, and maybe, right, this is not a matter of like, I have to do all this on my own. Like, what, Alyssa, you're making this really complicated. Like it's maybe it's not that deep, but if we
Mhm.
get curious, right, and we look at why is it that I'm looking for that validation? Because that's what it is. Why is it that I need people to understand me? Well, I'm searching for that connection.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm scared, maybe I'm anxious, maybe I'm feeling doubtful because of all of that. And this is new for me. And anytime we're doing something new, it's nerve-wracking, right? So I'm looking for a reassurance, maybe that I'm on the right path, right? And so if we boil that down to like, what's the function of that behavior that I'm finding myself doing? What am I getting out of it? Even if it's not giving me the result that I want, right? Because if someone doesn't, if that's a scenario, the other side of it is like, hey, that's stupid. Why are you doing that?
Mhm.
It might be like, okay, maybe I just won't make that decision, even though I really want to, right?
Mhm.
So that someone would be getting out of that is it's safer to stay where I am. I don't have to listen to that part of myself that's saying, hey, I want more.
Mhm.
But then we're abandoning and all that. So that's based on fear. And the other side of it is like, what is the hope or the wish that I'm trying to have from this? Is it that connection? Okay, well, I don't have to have somebody agree with me in order to feel more connected. Maybe it's a matter of like, I look for a different audience that,
Mhm.
is going to be just receptive to what I have to say. And
Mhm.
even them, they're going to have their own way of doing it, but that's really about connection and it's really about fear. So how do I put myself in scenarios that maybe I do just ultimately feel more connected.
Mhm.
And my fear doesn't have to be the thing that makes the decision. How do I um, cope with, if there's a word that I'm looking for, I don't know why this is the word, how do I quell that fear?
Mhm.
How do I, there's an unmet need there. So how do I meet the need behind that's making the fear louder?
Yeah. 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 I mean, 100%. And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck is like the fear-based decisions. And that we're like, well, I don't want to lose them, so I'll just do this. But then we're like losing ourselves in the process of making those decisions because if we're acting out of fear, we're just going to perpetuate more fear into our lives. So it's so eye-opening when you can, like, I love how you keep going back to curiosity because that's such an anchoring word of like, how can we approach this with curiosity and see what's going on beneath the surface here? And what are the decisions based of? Are they love for myself or is it fear out of loss, losing the other person or fear out of like what could happen? So I think that's a huge point for someone who maybe is listening and is like, okay, am I making this decision out of fear? And it could just be that catalyst to be like, okay, let me look at this further. So I absolutely love that. And I want to go into something too, because I think our minds can often not like play tricks on us, like so we can make a decision and our mind can justify that decision
Oh, yeah.
however we want to, because again, it's very well trained at keeping us safe. Can you talk about the difference between like maybe listening to our bodies versus like listening to our mind and how that can help us navigate decisions with a little bit more clarity?
Yeah, yeah. So thoughts are ideas. They're not facts. They're just ideas. We're trying to make sense of our experience. Whereas feelings are valid, even if like I don't like the way I feel, right? Jealousy is an example of that. I don't like to feel jealous. Okay, but jealousy stands for not feeling fulfilled. You want something that you don't have. That's valid.
Mhm.
That's valid.
Yeah.
So in terms of like how do we get out of fear-based thinking, right? Or I think this one's another one is like how do I know what's fear from what's intuition? Right.
Mhm.
An intuition, or like a knowing for like what's right for me exists in the body,
Mhm.
where fear is all based in the brain. So if it's
Mhm.
based in the brain, it's thoughts and it's just an idea.
Yeah.
If it's based in the body, that's your body signaling to you, what it is that you need that you don't have, or what it is that you need that you want. And so from there, how can I make a decision to fulfill that need? So
Mhm.
in terms of when you're thinking about or confronting like making a decision, left or right, and maybe that's like too simple because it's not just like left or right kind of thing, but you're thinking about option A or option B. When you think about option A, try to lower the volume of the thoughts. You can't ever have no thoughts because the brain is
Mhm.
meant to think. That's like saying lungs don't breathe, heart stop beating. It's meant to think. So lowering the volume of the thought and just connecting with what do I feel in my body when I think about option A, right? Let me get really clear on just what option A looks like, not on the fear of what option A looks like, but option A. Option A is move to Seattle, right? So think about just Seattle. Think about just moving, not about like, how am I going to move or what is Seattle going to be like? Just
Mhm.
Seattle as a whole. What do I feel in my body? Where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my belly? Does it feel closed off? Does it feel like I can't breathe? Does it feel like a lump in my throat? Okay. And then option B, staying home, staying where I'm from or staying where I'm at. Just that, not, oh, nothing's ever going to change. Not all of these like reactive fear-based thoughts. Staying home, what does it feel like in your body, right? Is it more open? Is it energetic? Do you feel it through your fingertips? Do you like I just want to jump out of my skin? Like, and is it excitement, right? That I think can kind of clue us in more than our brains.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that's it's really helpful because I love how you said like the end goal of Seattle and like what does that feel like versus like the logistics. So I can so see how like you can get called, well, like I don't want to pack my whole house up. I don't want to do this. Like I think that's a
Yeah.
really great example because it's like then you're looking at the outcome, like what could your life feel like versus like what do I have to go through to get there? And so it's really helpful because I think that is a trap for so many of us is like, I want this, but and then you can think about all the things that are in the way of it versus just like going towards what you desire in your life. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, really helpful. And I want to go into like a little bit more of that like generational aspect of things because like when we're we're talking about okay we're listening to ourselves, we're anchoring into our body signals, listening to our feelings, and we're moving in that direction, and then maybe we're still interacting with people that are in some of those older patterns of thinking and behaving, and now we're raising kids, and so we have like all these things that are acting. And I know personally a big thing for me was like, I want to break some of these cycles that have happened. And I'm very aware of the way I approach my children, but it can be so much going on when you're trying to parent yourself, you're trying to parent your children, you're trying to be recognize the patterns that are there you didn't even know for maybe 40 years. Can you talk about that? Because it's like so many women are overwhelmed trying to do all the things, be all the things, and trying to make the healthiest, happiest children possible. Can you talk about that? I know it's a loaded question.
No,
But
I'm sitting here and I'm a mom, so I get
yeah.
it's
Yes.
a lot. It's a lot. It's
Yeah.
is the I feel like most responsible that we feel for another human being, right? When you have
Mhm.
a child. I don't want to speak for everybody. Maybe that's my experience. Maybe and you're shaking your head, yes, so maybe
Yeah. I mean,
right. Everybody's
that's,
different, right? But it's overwhelming because yeah, I've got bills to pay and I've got a house to take care of and family dynamics and other people. Like there's so much on the plate. And yet we have this pressure to like, I want to raise a kind, happy human that can stand on their own 2 feet one day in this
yeah.
really hard world. So that's a lot.
Mhm.
While I'm also navigating my own shit. And
Exactly.
we all got it, right?
Yes.
So it is a lot. I think going back to if we can kind of like tie it all together, some certain things that we've talked about is like remembering that we are dancing with our children, right? They're having this big emotions sometimes, right? Or they're, depending on if they're a teenager or like where they're at in their lives, they're starting to really develop and move through the different life stages, friendships and dating and things like that.
Mhm.
They're going to have their own emotions. And when I see them, especially since I'm so connected to them, it's going to stir up emotion in me,
Mhm.
right? And my emotions belong to me and my childhood
Mhm.
and maybe things that I didn't have in that moment, or maybe it reminds me of my fear, maybe it is my fear more than it's theirs.
Yeah.
And so when we are having those emotions, right? And say it's not even our kids that is kind of like their stuff is rubbing up against ours. It could just be that we're overworked, we're burnt out, and then we're being asked for like more, right?
Mhm.
Looking back at the dynamics of like what has been going on like up until this point, what is it that I need right now in this moment that I don't have, that I'm not getting? And perhaps when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and watching my kid go through that thing, it's bringing up that unmet need from when I was a kid and thing that I didn't get. So that's a moment to be like, what did I need then? And how do I give it to myself? So it's like reparenting. And
Yeah.
that's a big term that I know that a lot of people are talking about now on social media, online. So yeah, standing there, it's like my toddler might be having a meltdown,
Mhm.
right? And they're overwhelmed. And I'm overwhelmed watching them be overwhelmed. And I
Mhm.
don't know how to help them, and they don't know how to help themselves. And I didn't have anybody to help me through that.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do I need right now? And how
Mhm.
can I cultivate that? What did I need? And then if I'm doing that for myself in that moment, like slowing down, that is going to help them ultimately, even just with like being a model for being a calm in a storm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because none of
Yeah.
us know the answers. Therapists or not, like my
Yeah.
answer is going to be very different from my son's.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I think you're just like doing it live sometimes, it's just you're just doing the best you can. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much, children bring out some of those deeper things that are within us. I mean, I see it with I have two boys, and I see it that like my older son is 6, and he's just like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I'm like, when is it enough? And like I found like I just had that moment. I'm like, oh wait, like the story I'm telling myself is that I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough for you. Like that's not necessarily your stuff. That's my stuff that I have to work through of like not feeling like I'm enough or not doing enough. And like, so it was so interesting. I had that like moment of pause. I'm like, oh, that's something I need to work through. So it's fascinating how when you can like just remove yourself from the dynamic and just see it for what it is, you can see so much more clearly like some of the things that you do need to still work through that have not been healed or processed from maybe 30 years ago or something.
Right. And
So,
if we make
yeah.
it simple, because like I know we're talking about it in like the whole picture kind of way, but and in the moment you're like, Alyssa, what are you talking about? Right? Because I'm like gonna scream. I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah.
In this moment, it's been the
Yep.
30th meltdown. It's been a
Yes.
rough week,
Oh
like
my
school
gosh.
starting.
Yes.
Great. All of this is really good, but in the moment, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm having an emotional reaction right now, just like my kid.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just slow down in it. I don't have to react to it. I
Mm-hmm.
might because I'm not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but I can repair when I do react to it.
Yeah.
So that's a for later thing, but in the moment thing, I'm having an emotional experience right now. I don't have to react to it. I can just acknowledge it and say, okay, I'm really frustrated. I can say that out loud too. And
Yeah.
in that moment, maybe it's a matter of being like, are you frustrated? I
Mm-hmm.
get it. Mommy's frustrated too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the other thing is like that I think is really grounding is just in that moment before we scream,
Mm-hmm.
do, or whatever the case may be,
Yep.
taking a deep breath and knowing that in that moment, we might not know how to help our kid with the thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a matter of just taking a deep breath, and that in front of your kid is modeling calm, modeling that like we can both be in a space, you can be in a space of having a really uncomfortable or stressful time or a big emotion, and we don't have to react to it. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you're modeling in that moment of calm. So two things is just deep breath or
Mm-hmm.
five,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And just saying like you don't even have to go as far in the moment to be like, what am I feeling? No, just I'm feeling something. I don't have to react to it.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful and so like actionable because I mean we've all been there and we've probably been there multiple times this week. I know I have, and it is like those moments, but I love that just the example you gave of like, I'm frustrated. Are you frustrated? Because I think sometimes, and this could be just some of those beliefs that come through, it's almost like we feel like we have to hold it together and not and just like be like, I'm okay, even though you know you're not. And it's like that discrepancy between what you're feeling and what you're showing, and then it kind of just erupts. So I love that you can just be vulnerable and say, like, I'm feeling this way. How are you feeling? And giving your child the gift of being able to express that and not feeling like they have to suppress it or hide it. And then the breath, I mean, it's like you need to have like post-its all over the house, be like, just breathe, breathe, because it's sometimes in those moments you don't think about that, but it is so powerful to just come back home to yourself, anchor yourself down, and then you can just approach it with a more clear ability of seeing it for what it is. So yeah, I love that because I think if anyone is a mom that's listening to this, you can very much relate to that. Like you've hit your limit. Like it's you're there, and I think we all hit that limit at some point because you're trying to do all the things, and it's a lot. And so just giving yourself grace in that moment, having some of those strategies that maybe next time you get to that point, you can remember those conversation and start implementing those. I think they're really, really valuable.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's like, okay, in those moments, because this goes back to generational patterns, it's like in
Mhm.
those moments, and maybe it's not even like a tantrum or meltdown. Like I
Mhm.
think we're talking about it in that way. It could be
Mhm.
anything really, though. Like
Mhm.
in those moments where maybe as the parent in the room, I'm having a big emotion because of what's happening, or they're having a big emotion, or this is just really heavy and really hard. I
Mhm.
might have, this, maybe my reaction in the moment is like, stop. Like, we have to get in the car.
Mhm.
Just stop, right? Now
Yeah.
it's going on and like it's just, ringing through my ears. My heart rate is increasing.
Mhm.
In that moment, if we like take time after and think about it, when I was having a hard time, was I kind of told in that moment, like, stop? Was I told to just pick myself up by my bootstraps and get in the car? Was
Mhm.
there any conversation in the car or later on or at night about like, hey, that was rough, right? It was rough for me too. Like was there that? because that's an opportunity. Like if we do that reflection in terms of like, what was my experience in those moments when I was a kid? What did I need something that I didn't get? Okay, so perhaps that's what my kid needs too, right? How do I first give that to myself, and I can practice it on my own with my with my partner, with my boss, with my friends, with my parents in those interactions, adult interactions, so that when I am trying to do that with my kid, I've got a little bit of a foundation. And it's not always going to be perfect. And that's okay, because your kid doesn't have to grow up thinking that you were perfect, because they're going to feel like they need to be perfect too.
Yeah, I love that. And just being able to circle back to it and realize like and nothing like doesn't have to happen in the moment, but like if you can circle back, because sometimes you do have to get in the car and sometimes you do have to go, but to have those moments of like, okay, did I handle that properly, or did I, is there a better way I could handle it? And then coming back to it to really check in. I think that's really powerful, and recognizing that like, it's just the message your child's going to receive from that is like, well, mom's aware of how I'm feeling. That really makes me feel heard. I feel like she recognizes where I am. And that's so powerful for making that connection with your child and knowing that you still have a voice in that dynamic. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's such a powerful tool, and just something that I think we can't hear enough, because you get into the autopilot of living, especially as a working mom, and it's just those little practices that can make a huge difference, and it's so powerful. So I really am so grateful for everything you shared. And for someone who wanted to connect with you, dive into it further, where can they find you?
The best place to reach us is our website. So that's www.collective-therapy.com. We are on social media, and moms can't do it all. So I'm not as active. We're not as active, although we're working to change that. So we do have an Instagram, we do have a Facebook, and things are definitely brewing. We've got some stuff coming out. So if you want to connect with us, we're going to be really more active very soon. We've got some really cool like e-courses coming out as well. We want to give our clients strategies, or even if you're just curious and you're wanting to kind of like dive in and learn some things or practice some things or get curious, like we do have some really cool stuff coming out. So even if you just want to connect for now, you can feel free. We'd love to have you. We have space for you.
I love that. And I will put everything in the show notes. So definitely connect with Alyssa. And again, I'm so grateful for everything you shared. I know there's going to be messages in here that so many of us are going to really take to heart and make some of those little changes and make a profound difference in our lives. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And again, for everyone listening, share this episode. It cannot be shared enough, especially to all those working moms or anyone who's experienced patterns that have maybe not served them in the best way. These things cannot be shared enough and really have a profound impact. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If something in this episode stirred your truth, reminded you of your worth, or helped you see your patterns with more compassion, you're already rewiring your life. Remember, you don't have to earn your place, overgive to be valued, or shrink to keep the peace. You get to honor your voice, you get to protect your energy, you get to live aligned with who you really are. If you're ready to go deeper, explore more tools, or join a community of women walking this same path, head over to drkellykessler.com. Everything you need to continue this journey is waiting for you. Until next time, take a deep breath, trust yourself, and keep choosing the version of you who feels like home.